Welcome to the Private School Leader Podcast, where private school leaders learn how to thrive and not just survive as they serve and lead their schools. I strongly believe that it is possible to have a long and happy and fulfilling career as a private school leader. And my passion is to help you figure out exactly how to do just that, right here on the Private School Leader Podcast. And I'm your host, Mark Minkus. So if you're listening to this in real time, depending on the part of the country that you live in, it is transitioning from winter into spring. So mid-March, and where I live, we have all four seasons, and I actually really like that. I like having all four seasons. I'm not a big fan of winter, but when winter is kind of winding down, the awesome thing is that you start to see the signs of spring. You start to see the daffodils pop up, and it starts to get a little warmer, and some of the trees start to bud. And so there's all different, there's the four seasons, and I really like the fact that I have all four of them where I live. But I was thinking about how we also have different seasons in our private schools. And so, for example, we have back to school season, and I always tell people, like, the 2 weeks before the first day of school and the first 2 weeks of school is probably the busiest month of the year for private school leaders. So we have back to school season. We also have, countdown to winter break season, where you're just trying to keep your eye on the ball and not keep your eye on the calendar. And then we have the 100 days of May, where it's just that, there's a concert every night, there's a ceremony, there's graduation, there's sports and the sports banquets. There's all kinds of things going on in our 100 days of May. But my least favorite season in a school year is actually the one that we're in right now, because I've found that mid-March to early April is often what I call tough conversation season. And so, for example, most schools have 1-year contracts for their teachers, or an offer letter that, has to be offered every year around this time. And, this tough conversation season, this is around the time for many schools where you're sitting down with that person and saying, hey, we're not going to be having you return. We're not going to be offering you a contract. We're not going to be offering you a position here this fall. Tough conversations. It also might be that you decide you are going to keep that teacher, but you're going to put them on a performance improvement plan. So, another tough conversation. And that's just the teachers. This is also tough conversation season for when you have to meet with a parent, because it could be, hey, we've had some meetings over the course of the year, as and blah, blah, blah. And we've just decided that we really can't meet your child's needs here at this school. And so, we want to help you find another school. Or, your child needs to repeat first grade. Those tough conversations that are going to get a reaction. And so I'll admit that, for me, tough conversation season in the past, especially earlier in my career, I didn't handle it well. I often let my fear and anxiety and insecurities keep me from having those tough conversations. And then I would often hang on to a teacher for a year or two too long, or hang on to a child that I couldn't meet their needs for a year or two too long. And I regret that. Not having tough conversations at this time of year, that's probably some of the bigger regrets of my career. And so I wonder about you, if that is causing you to think about certain things or have certain emotions when I'm mentioning tough conversation season. Well, here's the thing. On this podcast, we don't just sit in our thoughts and get stuck. We take action. And so on today's episode of the Private School Leader Podcast, I'm going to tell you the 4 keys to surviving tough conversation season. So I want to tell you what teachers are saying about Parent Academy. So teachers in North Carolina, Texas, Ohio, California, they are, working at schools where leaders have purchased Parent Academy. And as you've probably heard, there are two 45-minute PDs, plug and play PDs, which are video webinars. And then there's a 27-page workbook that you've got your part 1 and your part 2. And so some schools now have done these on PD days or at faculty meetings. And so just here are some comments, some quotes from some teachers, North Carolina, Texas, Ohio, California. Quote, "This is a paradigm shift for our school." Quote, "Customers versus clients changed how I see my job." Quote, "I never thought a PD could be relevant to all 3 divisions in our school. We all have the same issues with parents, whether we teach the 3-year-old or the 12th grader. Private schools are different. This PD was relevant to us from beginning to end." And then just 2 more. Quote, "I learned that the reason why parents may come off as defensive or have strong opinions about their child's experience in class is because they have hopes and fears for their child. Not having any kids myself, this perspective opened my mind and heart and helped me send some very important messages during the afternoon after the PD." And then finally, quote, "I have been in education for 30 years and this is the best PD I ever had." So with Parent Academy, you and your teachers will go from feeling anxious and stressed about working with parents to feeling confident, calm, and relaxed. And after I teach you the step-by-step framework, I'll then teach your teachers during these PDs, and you can hear the results that these PDs are getting at schools around the country. So I'd love for you to check out Parent Academy, and you can do that by going to theprivateschoolleader.com/Parent Academy. And then I want to give you a free gift, and to just my way of saying thank you for listening to the podcast. Today we're talking about teachers, parents, and we have to deal with difficult teachers. And I want to give you a gift called 7 Strategies to Effectively Deal with Difficult Teachers. And sometimes we need courage and confidence to deal with difficult teachers. And I think what you need is a plan. And so this guide is a step-by-step plan that you can use to help one of your difficult teachers improve their performance, improve their attitude. And so if that sounds like something that you could use, go to theprivateschoolleader.com/difficult to grab the guide called 7 Strategies to Effectively Deal with Difficult Teachers. And that's theprivateschoolleader.com/difficult. And then I just wanted to remind you quickly that I've launched the PSL Pro membership, and PSL Pro is a membership community that helps private school leaders go from feeling stressed out, discouraged, and lonely to feeling energized, fulfilled, and supported. And you'll have access to a thriving community of school leaders who actually get it and get you. And we go live every week. We have a masterclass, Success Path coaching session. Twice a month, we have a We Get It roundtable. There's a live Q&A. And so just this week, we had our live We Get It roundtable, and we had school leaders from Tennessee and Texas and California and Hawaii and Pennsylvania. And here are just a couple things that were overheard. I know I was giving you some quotes earlier. Well, here's a few more. Some things that were overheard at this week's We Get It roundtable. Quote, "I've been where you are." Quote, "I feel like quitting my job because it is just too hard." Quote, "My daughter cried when she saw me working on the board report at 2 a.m. And quote, "I see you and it gets better." So if you want to surround yourself with leaders who get it, who understand and want to support you, and then also you want to grow as a leader, you can learn more about joining the PSL Pro community by going to theprivateschoolleader.com/membership. That's theprivateschoolleader.com/membership. So let's talk about the 4 keys to surviving tough conversation season. Key number 1, when you don't have the confidence, reach for the courage. When you don't have the confidence, reach for the courage. So if you're preparing for a conversation with a teacher or a parent, a teacher not renewing their contract, a parent, counseling the child out of the school, you're probably going to feel a mix of emotions, maybe fear of how they're going to react, or guilt that you didn't do enough, or anxiety, or all of the above. Like, these are really tough conversations to have, and it's really natural to feel like you don't have the right words to say, and to lack in confidence about saying the right things. And you're lacking confidence because you're worried about how they're going to react. And we're often expected as leaders to be confident in our decision making, but we know what's going on the inside. A lot of times we're lacking confidence. So what do we do when we need to have that conversation, but when you're not feeling confident? Well, I know what happens to me. Doubt starts to creep in, and am I really making the right call? Maybe we could just give this person another year. And, we kind of can talk ourselves into or talk ourselves out of anything. And when we're lacking confidence, it's really easy to procrastinate and just kick the can down the road and then just hope for the best. And I've done that in my career. But the truth is that confidence isn't always something that we can rely on in the moment. A lot of the time we don't have enough confidence to have that tough conversation. And so in those moments, when we don't have the confidence, we're going to reach for the courage. And courage is the willingness to act in spite of fear, discomfort, or uncertainty. I want to give you the definition to courage one more time. Courage is the willingness to act in spite of fear, discomfort, or uncertainty. A tough conversation season in our schools, there's a lot of fear, discomfort, and uncertainty. And so courage is temporary, and you can reach for the courage because you're not going to have that courage all the time. Sometimes you're not going to have enough confidence to do the thing, to have the conversation. But if you have a mindset, if you use this key, this strategy, that when you don't have the confidence, you reach for the courage. Courage means showing up anyways. Courage means saying to yourself, I'm just going to do this because it's necessary. I'm going to do this because it's the right thing to do. I'm going to do this even though it's hard. My confidence doesn't get me saying those things or believing those things, but my courage does. And in that moment, courage is temporary. Confidence sometimes can be temporary too, but when we don't have the confidence, we're going to reach for the courage. It's okay not to feel confident. For crying out loud, this is very tough. This is emotional. We're high in emotional intelligence typically as private school leaders, and I sometimes think that our biggest strength is also one of our biggest downfalls. And what I mean by that is high in emotional intelligence is a strength, but it also makes us feel things very, very deeply. And we're sitting and talking to someone about not having them come back in the fall. And that's a human being that we're talking to. It's a teacher. It's a parent. And when we're high in emotional intelligence, we can't just detach ourselves from the emotion of the situation. But I'll speak for myself. Thinking about the emotion of the situation has caused me to shrink, has caused me to not have that tough conversation. But it's the right thing to do, and you're at this crossroads and you're stuck. I know I need to have it, but I'm scared. I know I need to have this conversation, but I don't feel like I can. So that's when we're going to have that tough conversation. We're going to schedule it. We're going to recognize it's okay not to feel confident, but we're going to step forward because we reached for the courage. And we're going to have the conversation because it's the right thing to do. even if we're not 100% sure of how it's going to go. So, key number one is when you don't have the confidence, reach for the courage. All right. For our season of tough conversations, key number 2 is to choose your discomfort. Choose your discomfort. Okay. So I want you to imagine that in front of you, you're sitting at your desk at school, and in front of you, there's 2 empty glasses. And the glass on the left, what you're going to do is you're going to imagine that the amount of discomfort that's going to come from having this tough conversation is equal to water. And the glass on the left, you're going to imagine that it has the discomfort equivalent to the water of having the tough conversation. So let's say that that glass is 2/3 of the way full with water, because this is going to be uncomfortable, okay? But on the right, you have an empty glass. And what you're going to do is you're going to fill that glass with the discomfort that you will experience over time if you don't have this conversation. So let's say it's a teacher, and the teacher's problematic in some way. Let's say it's about how they're dealing with kids not getting back to parents, maybe, a combination of several things that just, you've tried to work with them and it's just not working, and you need to move on and you need to get someone else in that classroom. So the discomfort of having that conversation is on the left in that glass 2/3 full of water, but on the right, what is the discomfort of keeping that teacher for another year? The parent complaints, the kicking yourself because you hung on to that teacher, the perception from other faculty members who can see that this teacher is problematic and that, what are you going to do about it? All of that discomfort. How full is that glass on the right? My guess is that if you really stop and think about it and you're honest with yourself, that glass has more water in it, and it's probably overflowing. And so you get to choose your discomfort. You can either choose the temporary discomfort of the conversation, or you can choose the long-term discomfort of not having the conversation. And so when we get a choice in life, sometimes it makes us feel a tiny little bit better, even if they're things that we don't really want to do. And you know all about that from, many private school leaders came up through and were in the classroom. You know what that's like when you're dealing with kids. Would you like to sit here and work with this group, or would you like to work with this group? You've got a dysregulated kid. You're probably thinking of a bunch of different things where it's like, okay, yeah, if you tell the child what to do, then it's a little bit of a power struggle. But sometimes if you give them a choice, then it goes a lot better. A lot of times when we need to have these tough conversations, we feel stuck, we feel trapped, we feel like we don't like our job and this is the worst part of our job and things of that nature. And it's like, okay, I get that. But it is part of the job. And sometimes if we have a little bit of agency, a little bit of a choice, it gives us a little bit more confidence and makes us feel a little bit more empowered. And a little bit goes a long way in this situation. So when you're deciding what to do, because you need to have the conversation, but it's also within your power to talk yourself into giving it another year, think about choosing your discomfort. The glass on the left represents the discomfort of the conversation. The glass on the right represents the discomfort of not having the conversation, which glass is more full, and then make your decision accordingly. All right. Key number 3 to surviving tough conversation season is to remember the child in the chair. And I've talked about this before in our podcast many years ago. A woman by the name of Heidi Hayes Jacobs came to our school to do a 2-day PD. She's the author of Curriculum 21 and some other books about curriculum. And Dr. Jacobs does the same thing no matter where she speaks. When she walks up to the front and is introduced, she gets a chair and she drags it up to the front near the podium. And she says, okay, I want you to close your eyes. I want you to think about one of your students. Picture their face. Listen, hear their voice. And I want you to pretend that this child that you're picturing is sitting in this chair. And then she says, okay, now everything that we're going to do for the next 2 days in this PD is going to be in the best interest of the child in the chair. And it sets a framework for, when you're talking about curriculum or the master schedule or, does this child need more support or this, that, the other thing with what we do in our schools. Sometimes it's easy to focus on how this affects me, but it's so important to remember the child in the chair about how this affects the child. So when you're deciding whether or not to meet, when you're in that critical moment, and maybe you've already decided to meet and you just need, the confidence and you're going to reach for the courage and you just need to, how do I survive this meeting without it just racking me with guilt or with, emotional impact? Well, one of the things that I've found to be very, very helpful is that if I'm having a conversation with a teacher and that teacher has objectively not met the standards for my school and they need to go, one of the things that's really helped me a lot is that before I meet with that teacher, I picture one of the children in that teacher's class. And let's say that the name of the child is Micah. And I'll ask myself, what's in the best interest of Micah? And I'll do that shortly before I meet with that teacher, and it does help me. And if it's a parent, I'll picture that their child, the child that we're going to be discussing. If we can no longer meet their needs, or if their behavior is such that they can't continue to be part of our school community, or perhaps they need to repeat a grade, I'll picture that child right before I meet with the parent. And then I'll say, what's in the best interest of the child? And so one of the things that can help us rise to the occasion when we have to have that tough conversation is to remember the child in the chair. And that brings us to our fourth and final key to surviving tough conversation season, and that is to put on your suit of armor. So as leaders, we often face a lot of criticism, and people have emotional responses after we have a difficult conversation with them. And when they say things, when they react, it's really easy to take those things personally. And when we take things personally, at least for me, and I think this might be true for you, is when we take things personally, then it starts to negatively impact our confidence. And it starts to make us second guess ourselves. And did I really make the right decision? And so on and so forth. Okay? But this is where the suit of armor comes in. I want you to think about putting on a suit of armor as mental resilience. Okay? And the suit of armor is going to give you the mental resilience to protect yourself from the emotional fallout of these tough conversations. Okay? And this is really important, so I want you to hear that. I'm going to say that again. Putting on your suit of armor is you having the mental resilience that you need to protect yourself from the emotional fallout of these tough conversations, because we have to guard our hearts as private school leaders. I said before that our biggest strength is also sometimes it's a blessing and a curse, being high in emotional intelligence and being a servant leader and caring so much and giving so much and investing so much of our time and our mental energy and our emotional energy. That's what makes us good at our jobs, but it also makes us open to emotional pain when we have these kinds of conversations, and then there's a reaction from the teacher or from the parent. And here's the thing. I want you to hear this. Your suit of armor is not about shutting down emotionally. We're not going to suddenly become a robot, but we're going to guard our hearts, and we're not going to let those emotions that are stirred up on the other side of the table from that teacher or that parent, we're not going to let those emotions impact our confidence, our purpose, our mission, our vision, our passion, our ability to lead. Those two things are separate. They're mutually exclusive. The things that a person is going to say in a moment of emotion when they've just received news that they really didn't want to hear, those things have to bounce off of that suit of armor. Because we're trying to stay calm and we're trying to stay objective, and there's this storm of emotions that's hitting. Well, I want you to imagine, when you are having this meeting, you've got your suit of armor on, and the things that are coming across the table that are emotional, they're the arrows. And those arrows are going to ding the armor. They're going to dent the armor. You might even feel the impact. It might even leave a bruise. But when you have that armor on, it's not going to allow those emotional arrows to penetrate the skin and to have you internalize the emotions of that situation. So if a parent becomes upset when you're saying that the child is not progressing enough and that you've decided they need to repeat a grade, they're going to probably be defensive and angry, and you might even hear them say things like, well, you're not doing enough for my son, or you don't care about my daughter. Like, that's a horrible thing to say, and it hurts and it stings, and it is like, well, that's just not true. But that's where the suit of armor comes in, and it keeps you from internalizing those words, because the arrows dent the armor, but then they fall off. So you feel the impact, but you're not going to internalize the emotion that's going to come at you across the table when you have that tough conversation with that parent or with that teacher. So what are the big takeaways? Well, if it's tough conversation season at your school, I want to help equip you so that you can survive tough conversation season and actually rise to the occasion and have that conversation instead of shrinking in that moment and procrastinating and talking yourself into giving it another year. And so how are we going to do that? Well, the 4 keys to surviving tough conversation season. Number 1, when you don't have the confidence, reach for the courage. Number 2, choose your discomfort. Remember the 2 glasses of water. Number 3, remember the child in the chair. What's in the best interest of that child in the chair? And then number 4 is put on your suit of armor so that those arrows will bounce off when you're having that conversation. And I like to end every episode with a call to action. And that is to just pick one of these strategies and use it the next time that you're having a tough conversation. I think it will make a big difference. And wrapping it up, I want to give you another free gift. And actually, I'm going to mention the one I mentioned at the top of the episode. We're talking a lot about teachers, a little bit about parents. So again, just a reminder, 7 strategies to effectively deal with difficult teachers. is a guide for you that will give you courage and confidence to deal with the difficult teachers at your school. And you can grab that at theprivateschoolleader.com/difficult. That's a free PDF guide for you called The 7 Strategies to Effectively Deal with Difficult Teachers. Just go to theprivateschoolleader.com/difficult. And then one last reminder that Parent Academy could really be a game changer for you and your teachers, with 4 modules for you, 2 45-minute PDs for your teachers, and the reviews are coming in as far as what teachers are getting out of it, and it's starting to change some things in some schools around the country. And so I'd love for you to learn more about that by going to theprivateschoolleader.com/Parent Academy. And I want to ask for a favor. Could you please share the link to this podcast episode with a leader in your life, a leader at your school, or someone you met at a conference, just another leader, school leader in your life, and also with a rising leader at your school. I think you have a good eye for that talent that's rising. Let's get this content into their hands so that they can be equipped to lead in the future. And I'd love to hear from you. If you're getting value from the podcast, I'd love for you to shoot me a quick email and just tell me what did you learn, or what's the biggest pain point that you're dealing with right now, because that could be an upcoming episode on the podcast. So shoot me an email at mark.o.minkus@gmail.com. That's mark.o.minkus@gmail.com. The show notes for today's episode are at theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 126. And if you would please write a review and rate the podcast wherever you listen to it, that helps the algorithm push this out as suggested content for leaders all over the world. The podcast is now in 64 countries. We just added Morocco in the last week. And so this is going out to leaders all over the world. And you writing a review and rating the podcast actually helps to make that happen. I'm on Instagram at The Private School Leader. And if you got value from the episode, just be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And I've been your host, Mark Minkus. I just want to say I appreciate you so much and all the hard work that you're doing at your school. Thank you for taking time out of your busy week to join me here today. And I'll see you next time right here on the Private School Leader Podcast. And until then, always remember to serve first, lead second, and make a difference.